This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to 2022. This is our first Board of Directors meeting of 2022, so Happy New Year, everybody. This one's, it's pretty, it's straight away stuff that some of which has already been, visited by some of our subcommittees, and so it's a pretty straightaway laying out our themes for 2022. First item on the agenda are public comments, and first I should call to order, right? I'm calling the meeting to order on January 21st, 2022 at 9:04 a.m. And item number one, public comments. Do we have any members of the public? Okay, hearing none, let's go to the consent agenda. The first item on that would be the minutes from our December meeting. Has anybody questions or corrections or anything involving the meeting minutes, December 17th, 2021? Okay, we'll vote on the consent agenda after we hear the next elements of it. So there's another request to extend the fuel cell energy project. Obviously, COVID and all kinds of issues have made this necessary. Brian, did you want to talk about that, or Bert?
Yeah, no, I mean, just at a high, yeah, go ahead, Bert.
Yeah, I'll just briefly, thank you, Madam Chair. It's just that from the documentation phase of things, the documentation process is running a bit slower than we had hoped. We ran into the holidays and we just didn't get enough done on the documentation side. So the senior lender and senior lenders council is pulling together with FCE's council as well as our council. And so, you know, they'll work through it. There are no issues. It's just a matter of process. So just in an abundance of caution, we know for sure we will not make the 31st of this month, which is what the board had approved previously. So we're asking through the 31st of March and feel quite confident. I hope I won't have to eat those words that we will have this wrapped up by then. Thank you. And thanks to the board.
Great. And just on some of the other items, non-resolution focused, we did include in the packet the progress to targets through Q2 of the fiscal year 2022. We'll dig a little bit into that when we get into the Budget Operations and Compensation Committee recommendations to revise the targets and budget. And then we also included an abbreviated version of our SOC 2 audit. One of the things that Eric has been able to develop is a 24/7, 365, anytime, anywhere in the world access to our systems for employees to be fully able to do work. And this audit takes a look at our technologies and controls, trying to ensure that certain things are operating to manage for cyber attacks, physical attacks, business interruption, all those sorts of things. And this is an important audit sometimes when we're developing partnerships with financial institutions. So we do it to help us understand where our weaknesses are and ensuring that we're in a good spot to be able to enable our partnerships with financial institutions. So we included an abridged version of that audit in the materials. We didn't want to give all the details in case somebody was trolling our materials, but if you're interested in it, we can send the whole thing to you. So turn it back over to you, Lonnie, on resolutions 1 and 2 on the consent agenda.
Brian, do you need any regulatory approvals for number 2?
No, I think we're all square. Thank you, Vicki.
Great.
Lonnie, are you there? Let me just check.
Lonnie, I think you're muted. There you go.
Oh, thank
There
you.
you
My family must have been in here. So do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda, resolutions 1 and 2?
This is Binu, so moved.
Thank you, Banu. Do I hear a
Second.
second? John?
John Harity, second.
Thank you, John. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions?
Lonnie, this is Matt. I just have to abstain, not that I have any problem with the extension, but we were involved with the fuel cell project, my firm, so I'm abstaining.
Okay, thank you, Matt. All right. Moving on to our next item.
All right, I think we're going to turn this to Jane. Do you want to take this?
Sure, thank you. This is an update from our Audit Compliance and Governance Committee meeting that we had on Tuesday morning. And the agenda item I'm speaking about today has to do with our recommendation of a new audit firm for our annual audit of all companies for fiscal year 22 through 24. We're required by state law to change auditors every 6 years. And it has been 6 years that we've been with Bloom Shapiro / now Clifton Larson Allen, and it is time for us to move on. So we posted an RFP on our website in November with responses due back around December 20th. And we heard from 2 firms, PKF O'Connor Davies and Barry Dunn. We assembled an internal team of the members below, Bert, Brian, Eric, myself, and Sean and Dan, who are on my accounting team. And we reviewed and selected an auditor. Next slide, please. Our proposal format, so we looked at the firm's independence, their license to practice, and what their peer review results had been. Their qualifications and experience, particularly for us, was important. Their experience with government GAAP accounting, and also important to us was similar engagements, since we are a unique entity. Fees as well, and then the references. And coming up from that, we unanimously selected PKF O'Connor Davies, and the ACG committee recommends to the board that we do approve them. The fees for the 2 firms were within 3% of each other. Are there any questions? Okay, and hearing none, the resolution is that the Green Bank Board approves the ACG recommendation for PKF O'Connor Davies to perform our audit services for the Green Bank for the next 3 fiscal years, 22 through 24.
Do I hear a motion to adopt this
This is-
So
resolution?
moved, John Harity.
Thank you, John. A second?
Second, this is Matt.
Hey, Matt, thank you. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Okay, thank you. Moving on to our next, we're going to be talking about financing programs. So that's going to be, and recommendations. So that's Mackie and Elise.
Yes, sorry, Madam Chair, we've got the budget operations and compensation.
Oh, of course, sorry.
Sure.
I keep saying the 4B. Okay, so this was another recent meeting of one of our subcommittees. So that's going to be Eric and Jane again, and John Harity talking about the proposed revisions to FY22 targets and the budget. So take it away.
Certainly. Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a recommendation coming from the Budget Operations and Compensation Committee, which met about a week and a half ago. As the board may or may not be aware, I know we have some new members. We typically revisit our targets and our budget halfway through the year, and this is the process that we're just concluding. So we're coming back to the board with an update on both of our targets in our budget. First, with regard to targets and the incentive programs, we're looking to actually increase this budget, or I'm sorry, increase this target overall. This is primarily due to how we were looking at the RCIP and just some exclusion of some projects that we should have included in the original target. It was an arithmetic oversight on our side, and it's something that really wouldn't happen again. It was a bit of a fluke, but we want to update that target to reflect that. So we're going from an original target of 1,633 projects to 2,734 projects. An increase in capital deployed from 36 million to 79 million, and an installed capacity of 20.1 megawatts versus 9.8. So it's a great increase there. That's again driven primarily by the RCIP numbers and some projects that had been excluded. We are bringing down our targets on battery storage just based off of what we're seeing and what we're hearing from our installer partners who are working with us on launching their side. We've launched the program, now they need to launch their businesses. And the feedback that we've had is that's just going to take a little bit longer than we'd expected due to supply chain issues and then just getting people on board and now selling batteries. So we still have the full year-on target that that was set by PURA, and by whole year target, I mean calendar year, but we're expecting more of that deployment to take place in the second half of the year, and the deployment that occurs in the first half of this fiscal year to be a little bit slower. So we're just tweaking the target for that. In terms of the Smarty loan and Posigen, we're leaving those targets flat for the year. That Smarty is well on its way to achieve or exceed that target, and Posigen we believe will come close to hitting that number, and that's just based off of what we've seen so far through the completion of the RCIP. Any questions? Yes.
Eric, this is Brian. Before we move on, so as we've been talking about in recent months, the Green Bank is transitioning the RCIP. We're going to get an update from Sarah in a minute, and then we are implementing a new program, battery storage program, that we launched through a press release earlier this week. We included that in your package. So the battery storage is really a new market, and it's a new market in a couple of instances. One, we're very knowledgeable of the residential market, given our experience and expertise in the residential solar business. The non-residential market incentive for battery storage is very different than what we're used to, and what we're going to hear from Ed Kranich and Sarah Harari later on in the presentation is that there may be a lot of pent-up demand for non-residential systems that we're seeing come in the queue. So this number here in terms of installed capacity may actually be a lot more, given what we're seeing as a release of the program earlier this week. So this number is going to constantly be in a state of flux as we try to wrap our arms around understanding the market, but we'll get a little bit more flavor as Ed and Sarah give us a 2-week update once we get into incentive programs. Just wanted to say that, Eric, and when you get into the budget, we can talk about the incentive, same thing.
Certainly. And just before I move on from this slide, at our budget operations and compensation committee, John, I know you inquired as to the job creation associated with these, and that wasn't a number that I had on hand. And so just per that request, incentive programs wise, we're based off of our job impact methodology, we're expecting this to create 253 job years out of these investments. So with that, why don't we move on to the financing programs? So looking here, we have, we're actually revising our targets down slightly across the financing program. So we're going from 900 projects down to 679, going from 61 million down to 48.9 million, and decreasing capacity from 19 megawatts to 16.5. This is driven primarily by the forecasts around the SBEA. This program, we don't control the customer acquisition. We're solely there for the funding. And we have been reliant upon Eversource's marketing and Eversource's forecasts. And it just appears that they're having a bit slower uptake than versus their original forecasts. So we're revising our targets down there. In terms of CPACE, we're adjusting this target based off of the third-party lenders. I think we have a higher degree in confidence in what's in the pipeline of projects that we're currently working on with contractors and building owners coming to fruition. But what we're being told by the third-party financiers is they're going to get the same amount of capital out, or similar amount of capital out the door, similar amount of capacity installed. However, it's just going to be fewer projects. So good on them for being more efficient. But we are revising our targets as such. Similarly, on the PPA, we're revising that down to about 5 projects to match our pipeline. The difference here, and Mackie, you're welcome to speak to this in a bit more detail, but my understanding is that's primarily driven by the third-party developed projects that we don't expect to come across the finish line this year.
That's certainly a component of it, where that's where we're lending to third-party owners. We're the debt component, and they're the developer and leading the customer acquisition. That's a piece of it. Also, a larger piece of it is our state projects. We set our goals based on the pipeline that we've developed there. As we've further developed the second round of projects, which is what this year's goal is based on, we've unfortunately, due to primarily because of all the supply chain issues and the steel prices we've seen, a lot of the carports that we'd had in that portfolio are looking like they're going to be not feasible, just due to the price increases. So we can't offer a discount. We're not sure we're going to be able to offer a discounted PPA. So we're not giving up on those yet. We're kind of scrambling to try other paths to development or pricing, but not as confident on being able to deliver on those given all the changes. And then on the CPACE, yeah, I'll just say that the third party, because this is a precursor of what we'll talk about in a little bit, the third party lender market is really driving towards the new construction financing. So those tend to be much larger projects, but fewer of them. So you see the capital employed staying the same because we've got a smaller number of projects, but they're just much bigger.
Cool. Thank you, Mackie. And then the other adjustments on here are related to multifamily, and that's just based off of pipeline and slower uptake with us deploying PPAs as a product to multifamily properties versus our traditional lending that we had been focused on the line loan. So overall, these adjustments bring our organizational targets to 2,500 projects. I'm sorry, wrong column. They bring it to 3,400 projects for the organization and $128 million in terms of capital deployed and 36 megawatts of capacity installed. And overall, the job creation that we're looking at for this, John, is 1,100 jobs or 1,100 job years created. With that, why don't we move over to the budget and let's talk about what we need to pay for. So in terms of updating the budget midway through the year, looking at revenues, we are forecasting about a $3.3 million revenue increase. And that's driven primarily by the Regi auction proceeds. So we have a higher clearing price, increased demand for those tradable discharge permits. So that our percentage of that increases, or our percentage stays the same, but our proceeds increase as those prices increase. So that's 3 million of it, and then we have an additional 227,000, which is just higher than expected utility customer receipts. Moving on to the expenses. We're looking at an overall increase in expenses of operating expenses of $448,000 for the rest of the year, and an overall increase of $1.2 million in terms of incentives and grants. And I just want to talk about this at a high level. This is primarily driven by the award to the Green Bank by PURA of the battery storage program. So as you may recall, we included the battery storage targets in our targets, but we didn't budget much for it because we were waiting on the definition of the program to do so. So now that we have that, we're able to put together a more defined budget, and that's what we're bringing to you today, are those inclusions. So I'll quickly walk through high level what we're looking at changing here. So starting off in the financing programs, we have some slight adjustments in terms of staffing. This is basically due to reallocations and how we allocate overhead. We made some changes on the environmental infrastructure, a delay of bringing on the director there. And when we did that, it shifts overhead. So it's a net pretty flat for the organization in terms of we're not adding overhead charges, but I just bring that there. We're also looking at a slight increase of $10,000 to bring on an Environmental Defense Fund Climate Corps Fellow for the summer. In terms of the incentive programs, this is where the majority of the changes are. It has to do with the battery storage. So we have an increase of $125,000 for program administration. This is to cover the costs of development and deployment of our our customer enrollment platform. So we are leveraging our existing Salesforce platform, working with our developer to build this out. This was the most cost-effective option across the board that we saw. We're looking at a $310,000 increase to support the launch of this program in terms of marketing. We have a lot of marketing materials to develop. We need to just overall promote the program, and then we're looking at what we can do to promote this to targeted groups, so the vulnerable communities and other grid edge communities and whomever that PURA has defined as priority. We're asking for an additional $90,000 in terms of consulting for energy storage, and that's to help us support PURA's mandate to the Green Bank to help them think about the benefit cost analysis associated to front of the meter storage. So we need to bring on a consultant to help with some of that modeling, and just somebody who has can help us think through the business models of front of the meter. In terms of additional expenses, there's an additional $129,000 in office expense, which that's related to commitment fees from the Shrek warehouse, so not related to energy storage. This was just something that was not in our original budget that we recognize now that we need to include. And then finally, there's an overall decrease in compensation and benefits on the incentive program side by about $270,000, which is related to the overall allocation of overhead and all the fun stuff that I was talking about a second ago. The other addition is this $1.2 million, which includes $1.1 million for battery storage incentives. Those are the upfront incentives the Green Bank is responsible for administering that go to the battery owners to decrease the cost of install. So we're asking for that. And then there's an additional $60,000 in grants, and that's to support some of the more targeted outreach that we're looking at doing in terms of multifamily housing, in terms of low to moderate income. It's really to support the outreach that partner groups can do to help these channels. Finally, in environmental infrastructure, as I mentioned, we're looking at not bringing on the director as we had originally planned in January. We as Brian can talk about the update, the progress in planning and for environmental infrastructure is moving quite well. We just don't feel that we're at the point that we can put together a job description to bring on a person for this role. So we're looking to do that probably at the earliest in June. So that's how we've updated the budget. And then we're going to reallocate that those costs to consulting to support some of the other things that we're finding along the way that we need to help us build out that strategic plan. I know this was a little bit high level and a bit rushed, but are there questions or concerns at this point?
The only other thing, Eric, I would add is on the battery storage incentive. Again, just as we highlighted before, the revision in the target of 2.2 megawatts, and given what we're seeing in the commercial, in the first week commercial submissions, which we'll get into a little bit later, this upfront incentive number may change dramatically.
What I was going to advise the board is just based off of being that this is the first year for battery storage, we're still learning about the rate at which projects will get deployed. So there is a possibility that we would come back to the board with an additional budget revision based off of this deployment in April to update that, should we so need. Finally, the last part of this that I want to bring to your attention is just an update to the strategic partners. As you may remember from last summer, we typically bring to the board partners that we identified that we're going to work with that are above, that are a higher dollar threshold, and we seek the board's blessing to enter into contracts with them. We have two here that we need to update, and those are driven primarily by the addition of battery storage. And then the third is getting added, and that is driven by battery storage. So Craftsman Technology is our Salesforce development partner. As I mentioned, we've been needing to and have been building out that customer enrollment platform. Guidehouse, formerly known as Navigant, were our business or benefit cost analysis modeling partner prior to us being awarded storage, and through a competitive RFP, have in conjunction with the two EDCs have been awarded the contract as being the EM&B partner for the program. So we need to increase their PSA to cover that. And finally, Stark Raving is our marketing agency. They're such a great name, but they, due to bringing on battery storage, we're going to increase our spend with them. So we need to increase the amount of that PSA. So that's all that this is in this resolution. So overall, the resolution is just based off of the Green Bank Board of Directors authorizes the Green Bank staff to enter into new or amend existing professional services agreements with the following contingent upon competitive bid process having occurred in the last 3 years, except Craftsman Technology, which is below our threshold. For the so that's Craftsman, Guidehouse, and Stark Raving for fiscal year 2022, with the amounts of each PSA not to exceed the applicable approved budget line item. And resolved that the Board of Directors approves the fiscal year 2022 budget and target adjustments outlined in the accompanying memorandum.
Are there any questions or observations that, just doubling back again? So as everybody knows, one of our board subcommittees, Budget Operations and Compensation, has been diving deep into this and really hashing it out, and they're recommending that we approve it. Any concerns?
I had a question or a concern, I guess. This is John Harity. There's a coalition of about 80 environmental groups and maybe another coalition of solar developers who are all saying that they're going to be pushing basically raising or removing the cap on solar in this legislative session. So I'm just wondering if that were to happen, what does that do to our
So
budget?
let me answer it, and then I could turn it to Mackie on the financing side. So I believe the policy, Connecticut General Statutes 244Z, which is the tariffs, passed in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, Chairman Reed. And within that, for the non-residential tariffs, kind of the ZREC, LREC equivalent, the zero emission renewable energy credit and low emission renewable energy credit equivalent, there was a cap established of 50 megawatts a year for the next 6 years, so 300 megawatts. In the residential form of the tariff, there was no cap established. So we are hearing, as you are saying, John, that there are stakeholders out there who want to lift that 50 megawatt cap. The challenge, I think everyone's broadly supportive, but I think the challenge is that when you lift the cap for a program that uses a reverse auction or a competitive RFP, that you could potentially be lifting ratepayer costs too. You know, I'm sure this will be debated, discussed in session. With respect to our products, if the cap is lifted, then there will be more opportunities for more municipalities coming through our solar map or other financing programs, CPACE, Green Bank Solar PPA. It would probably lift us a little bit more there. But I don't know, Mackie, if you had anything else you wanted to add.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there would be, after more projects would get awarded tariffs. Those projects, just by nature of, right now they have 50 megawatts to give out. So the most expensive projects do not win those tariff awards. If there's more tariff awards to give out, then some of those projects that wouldn't have won otherwise will get them. So there will be more opportunities for us to finance projects. So yeah, I would anticipate the goals going up a little. We're pricing projects now that, some of them are more expensive than we typically see in terms of build costs, because I think a lot of people are trying to figure out where this tariff auction is going to, it's kind of like back to the early days of ZREC, where no one knew exactly what pricing was. In fact, those prices were very high compared to where we see them now. So, a lot of those projects on the high end, which might or might not go this time, would go if the cap is removed. So, that we could count on a lot of our pipeline getting awards and moving forward.
This is Lonnie. I have to say, the old cap lift syndrome is something I think Mayor Hordick would agree. We've lived with quite a bit in the legislature, and it just goes with the territory. So we'll deal with it. Any questions or concerns?
Lonnie, it's Laura. I just have questions about the annotations on the side of the budget line items, the changes. Is there any detail that I can look at just to remind myself next month when we're reviewing this?
Eric,
Yes,
you got it, right?
Yeah, it's on page 15 and 16. There's two of them. I was just looking quickly through it to see if I could see a list.
Yeah, I'm happy to put something together that's a little bit more in direct, broken out list form. In the memo that was out, we reference all of the adjustments by the letter number. But I could, if it would make things easier, I'm happy to provide you just a bullet pointed list of that.
It would be helpful, but I can go back to the memo, but I just don't know where the memo.
Oh, I'll make sure you get a copy.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Do I hear a motion to approve Resolution 4?
Lonnie, it's Laura. I make the motion to approve Resolution 4.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
This is Bettina. I'll second.
Thank you, Bettina. Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? All right, moving on. And the next, again, we're going to talk about financing programs, updates, and recommendations. And Mackie and Elise, I believe, are going to start us off.
Thank you, Chair Reed. So today we're actually, it's a good introduction to CPACE for some of our newer members, we're going to see both aspects of the Green Bank's role in CPACE. One is lender and other as program administrator. Just before we jump into the first side of it, the lending with a project for approval, just real quick at a high level on CPACE. So CPACE, Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy. This is a program where a tax assessment, a senior tax assessment, is used to secure financing to a property for a clean energy improvement. The legislature passed a law back in 2011 to create this this program, this tool, and empowered us as the administrator of the program for the state. So the tax assessment, it's a senior tax assessment, so it creates a very secure mechanism for a lender to provide financing to a property. So it unlocks terms that a building owner wouldn't be able to access otherwise. So up to 25-year fixed rate lending. So you can create a scenario when you're stretching the payments out, 25 years, the payments are low enough that in most cases, the energy savings are exceeding the repayments on the loan. So the building owners are cash flow positive from the beginning, and there's no cash out of pocket from them in order to do these clean energy improvements. So it's a very attractive mechanism for building owners for that reason, very attractive for lenders because it's such a secure investment with the senior tax assessment as their security. And it's a great program for us and the legislature and the state from a policy perspective, because we get a lot of private capital coming into these projects through this mechanism to get them funded. So that's the program at a high level. As I said, we play two roles. One is a lender and one is the administrator of the program. Here we'll focus on our lending role, where we're proposing a project where we'll be the lender to a borrower for a project. So let me turn it over to Elise to talk through this one.
Great, thanks, Mackie. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, great. So yeah, this is a project that we're looking at in the Plantsville section of Southington. This is a $1.38 million project for a concrete manufacturing company, F&F Concrete. They're looking to do about a 450 kW solar project. About 162 kilowatts of that will be a roof-mounted system, and then there will be 4 separate carport systems that will be totaling around 290 kW. Next slide, please. So looking again, $1.38 million project. They're looking to finance this over a 25-year term at our 5.95% interest rate. They recently did a property appraisal. The 2.6 million is an as-complete appraisal. So they had an appraiser come in and look at the property, inclusive of the new additions of the solar system. The loan and lien to value ratio is a little bit higher than, well, loan to value is within our standard underwriting criteria. Lien to value is a little bit higher than we normally like to see. But we do have a predefined set of exceptions to our underwriting criteria for lien to value, and this one falls squarely in that. So our finance team was able to get comfortable with this project, and also we've got a stellar DSCR there, so we were able to get comfortable pretty quickly. Next slide, please. So again, this project looking to commence in 2022. And the F&F Concrete Corporation is the owner of this property in Southington, the Plantsville section of Southington. Next slide. And these are some of the metrics. Mackie was talking through some of the things that we look for in CPACE projects. One of the things I'll point out on this memo sheet here, a few lines down, you'll see the savings to investment ratio, which is that 1.27. So as Mackie was explaining, we always want that to be higher than 1. And of course that falls right into that with some really great savings. Another thing to point out here, over the effective useful life of this project, which is a 25-year term, the gross savings, inclusive of the tax benefits, will be almost $3.5 million. And last slide. So again, just some summary metrics here showing some of the savings. Also the electric savings in that second table there, about halfway down, looking at about $42,000 in MMBTU savings, not dollars, excuse me, 42 MMBTUs in savings. I think that's it. Oh, actually, and I'll also mention this particular project is part of a larger portfolio of projects that we're looking at with a family. There's a few different members of the family that have different businesses throughout really the Southington area. And there's about 6 different projects totaling about $6 million. So this is actually the second project that's coming to us from that portfolio. We've already closed a project with the AquaTurf, which I'm sure a lot of our Connecticut natives are very familiar with. Pretty big mainstay here in Connecticut. So this is kind of part of that larger portfolio of projects that we're looking at there. And this project is also receiving an Energy on the Line grant. A few years ago, DECD gave the Green Bank a pool of money to distribute for manufacturing facilities in Connecticut, where they would get a maximum of $40,000 in grant funding to if they were doing a CPACE project. And so this project will be receiving an Energy on the Line grant for being a manufacturer. And I think that's everything.
Any questions?
Lonnie, this is Matt. I just have a question. Maybe this is something we can talk about when we talk about our atypical customers, maybe that are in a different category. But do we, when we look at a commercial project like this, where it is an industry that has, environmental exposure, do we look at compliance history as one of the risk factors? And I have no knowledge of this company. I'm sure they have a fine compliance history, but just knowing the nature of concrete manufacturing, is that something we look at when we have, a new client who, might have an unusual type of exposure?
Yeah, we actually run an environmental screen on every project that comes through. So when we do our application review, that's part of what we do. If a project comes through, we use the EDR platform. And if a project comes through as a high risk, we bring it through additional channels. We'll run a more in-depth report. And if that still comes back as a high risk, we have a firm that we work with that can kind of help us determine, what the risk is there. And of course, our finance team is aware of that. We work with the building owner if there is any risk, or anything that's popped up in the past, just to kind of understand where they're at with resolving that.
Yeah, and I think, Matt, so yeah, we, that what Elisa's referencing, we're looking at, I think this you're very familiar with, looking at if there's been any property issues, contamination or anything. I believe you're referencing more regulatory compliance with it, given the unique nature of this company, there are things just in terms of operating their business outside of maybe whether they're contaminating their property, rules that might be around their operations and their compliance with those. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm just thinking of some of these types of operations that have high Clean Water Act or Clean Air Act exposure is an area where the fines are pretty heavy. I know Deep could probably talk to this more. I just wonder if that's something we typically Deep on a lot of things, they just ask, what's your compliance history? I just wonder if that's a question we ask if a flag is, if we're doing our environmental screen.
No, it's a good, outside of that sort of property contamination issues, we're not looking unless it's something they disclosed to us or that we see in their financials that there have been fines in the past. I mean, underwriting team, jump in here if you're doing anything that I'm not aware of. But in terms of that diligence on compliance with regulatory requirements, we haven't done that in the past. I think in this case, I think you're right, Matt. Hopefully, it's just a quick outreach to Deep to ask if there's any history of issues with a company, but perhaps from a more systematic standpoint, Bert, maybe we should talk and develop a process for in certain cases where we're working with Deep or whatever, some sort of way to do some diligence around this.
Yeah, Mackie, my thought is maybe we can just do this when we talk about atypical client. I don't want to hold up this project. It just sort of dawned on me. And I know we're going to have a bigger discussion that doesn't really, this might relate to it. Maybe it's just something, and then everyone can think about it and we can weigh in on it then. Like I said, I'm not really thinking of this particular company. I just thought, it's an area of different exposure. Maybe we should consider it.
Yeah, I think
this is Lonnie. I'm just wondering what our exposure is in the current contractual relationship. If there's any bad behavior, is that on them? I mean, are we in any way exposed with our?
Yeah, Lonnie, I think we aren't directly, but here's my line of thinking is some of those operations that trigger Clean Water Act or Clean Air Act fines, where the fines are $25,000 a day, per day, could add up. And then you have combine that with operation that's not like a normal commercial property that if the owner got in trouble, they sell the property and a new business goes in. I mean, like gravel pits, earth operations, concrete operations, they're sort of specialized and, you can't just flip it to a different type of commercial use. So I don't think we have any direct exposure. It just may be it's at risk of becoming more of a non-performing asset more than anything. But again, we have our lien on the actual property, but if the property then is liened by, and I'm not sure if like a DEP super lien would come in over above us. But anyway, it's just these properties that aren't easily converted to some other use.
Yeah, I think in the past, I think those super liens do trump all, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's an excellent point, Matt. I think we should discuss this. I think you're right in that atypical situation. I think they're, and I guess I'd have to ask Brian Farnan or Alex Kodovenko if they're on the line. But I think there are broad representations in the financing agreement about compliance matters, but I'm not absolutely sure that they extend to environmental compliance. Brian, do you have a thought on that?
Sure. No, yeah, we do have environmental compliance components of all of our financing documentation for loans.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it goes with representations though, but yeah, we'll make sure we'll double check the financing agreements. But again, it's a very good point. But I agree. Let's take it up in the atypical customer kind of discussion that we have lined.
Also, I just want to thank Matt for raising this issue. And, in my role, I'm happy to obviously, be involved in that discussion of how to coordinate on the deep side.
Great, thank you. Yeah, even if we have all the appropriate legal protections in place and we have the lien and everything, if this is someone who, we just mentioned it to Deep, and Deep's like, "Are you kidding me? Like this, they're terrible. It's trouble. Like let's not get into something."
It goes a little beyond just the legal issues, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah.
Great. Yeah, we'll talk about it in that meeting. We'll do some thinking.
Okay, but Matt Ranelli, you're not saying you want to stop us going forward with Resolution 5 today?
Correct. Yeah, no.
Okay.
This is just, I just want to flag the issue.
Okay, good. Anybody other observations or questions? Do I hear a motion to approve Resolution 5?
It's Matt, so moved.
Oh, thank you, Matt. A second?
Second, Adrian speaking.
Thank you, Adrian. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Any abstentions?
Given our prior discussion, I am going to abstain from this one. Not based on
Okay.
any knowledge, but because it's not based on that knowledge, if that makes sense.
So in other words, you're covering your butt. Good.
Well, no, until we sort out what our process will be to confirm with my deep colleagues, where people stand in their environmental compliance. I think it's best to abstain.
Okay. Good. Point well taken. Okay, so now moving on to our next item.
Yes, so now we're going to switch over to our administrator role. So the piece of law I mentioned earlier that created the program designated us as the statewide administrator for the program. So in that role, it's almost like we're the regulator of the CPACE market. We create the rules, we interpret the statute into the program guidelines, which set up how the program is run and how third-party lenders can access the CPACE tool for projects that they want to fund. The most important, arguably the most important aspect of that administrator role is the setting up the program through the program guidelines, which is what we're going to talk about here. And one aspect of them, which is CPACE for new construction. Before I turn it over to Lisa to actually get into the substance of this, the way just a little bit on process and a change we're going to make here. The way we've handled the CPACE program guidelines really up until now from day one has been that the staff prepares the guidelines or the changes that we're bringing. We bring them to the board for approval, and then we enter into a statutorily required public comment period, in which case, if we get substantive comments back, we then come back to the board to present those and talk through any recommended changes that result from that public comment process. You could argue about whether that's a good process, and I know at least one board member, Matt Ranelli, has recently raised that it's probably not the best because it could be interpreted as not really taking public comment seriously, that we're already getting you to approve something before we've done that comment. So for that reason, plus the fact that, as we'll talk about here in a minute, for this particular issue, we don't anticipate this will be as clear and easy as other CPACE program changes. Frankly, I think you could count on one hand the number of public comments we've gotten on all the CPACE program guideline changes we've made over the 10 years. For this one, it'll likely be contentious, or at least there'll be disagreements on with this recommendation or recommended changes to this recommendation that we'll put forward. So for both of those reasons, as we've talked more about it, I know the memo and what we sent out was recommending a vote here today, but we'd like to change the process to do the public comment process first, work with the stakeholders, and come back to you with a recommendation that either hopefully we all agree on with the stakeholders, or at least we can present sort of what the pushback has been and what stakeholders are saying and why we're recommending what we are. So with that sort of long process overview, let me turn it over to Elise to talk through the substance of the program guideline changes that will be taken out to public comment. Again, we'd just like to give you an overview so you understand what we're doing here, any initial feedback you might have, just as we enter those conversations with stakeholders, but then we would be coming back to you in a few months for approval. All right,
Great.
so Elise, take it away.
Thanks, Mackie. So just to talk through some of a little bit of the history on the pilot. So we launched the pilot in 2018, really just to kind of understand the new construction market in Connecticut, and also, as Mackie was alluding to get some feedback from the market as well, from our capital provider partners and from developers and property owners. So the idea behind it was, since there really isn't a baseline per se, as we look at in our traditional CPACE financing projects, like we just saw with the F&F concrete project, where the pilot proposed using a whole building energy model to demonstrate what the energy performance will be. So in order to qualify for CPACE new construction, under the pilot, we wanted that building to be at least 10% better than code in terms of its energy performance. Then we would determine the total eligible construction cost, or the TECC, and we did that by reviewing their construction budget and kind of pulling out pieces of that were directly related to the design and the build of the building. And then we would, based on whatever that TECC was, the total eligible construction cost, we would then determine how much they could borrow in CPACE financing. So there's an example here. So for every project that met that minimum, if they were at 10% above energy code, we would be able to offer them 10% of the TECC in CPACE financing. And then for each additional 1% in energy performance above code, there was an additional 1% of TECC in CPACE financing, up to 20%. So another example is, if they were at 13% above code, they would be able to look at 13% of the TECC in CPACE financing.
And again, just at a high level, so we're talking about financing new construction projects. Prior to 2018, this was all retrofit. So this was all to an existing building. We knew how much energy they used. We knew what their cost was. When we were trying to figure out how much we can lend, we know what you would have spent if you hadn't done a project. We know what you're going to save after the project. So that's the delta between those two. That's the maximum CPACE loan. This is a new building with new construction, so we don't have that history. So we needed to figure out an approach, and this was our first take at doing that.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that too. We worked with our technical administration partner at the time. We also were working, or I guess reviewing other programs in other states, other jurisdictions, just to kind of get a feel for it. But again, it was really just as a pilot should be, to gather information and to try to understand what the market needs were and how a program would work. And so this is the pilot performance so far. We've had 6 closed projects totaling just over 27 million, which includes the largest CPACE project we've done in Connecticut to date, which is this first one up here, the Castle Green project, at almost 14 million. But 3 different capital providers were able to close projects under the pilot in 3 different property types: multifamily, 2 hotels, and an office building. Next slide, please. So as we were kind of looking at ways to improve the new CPACE new construction section of our guidelines, we've had as Mackie mentioned earlier, we've had a lot of proactive feedback, I guess, from our capital providers especially. But really the idea around the amendments and the additions was to give all of our external partners, developers, capital providers, and borrowers a simplified way to access CPACE new construction financing, while of course still preserving the program's public policy aspects. So a few things that we're proposing. We're simplifying the way to that the project, simplifying the way to determine the eligible amount of the total eligible construction cost. So again, previously we were pairing that the amount financed directly with the percentage above code. We've kind of decoupled those. So just you're meeting a minimum threshold, you're able to access a certain amount of financing. This is a lot easier, especially for developers, you know, when there's a possibility of getting anywhere from 10 to 20% financing, you know, in our previous version, that's a pretty big difference. So telling them, you know, you just have to get to this threshold and you'll get this much money is much simpler. And then we've also added an additional way to access or to demonstrate the energy performance of a building. Previously, it was just using that whole building energy model approach, having a percentage above code, and that's what we would look at. Due to some feedback from the utility companies, the residential new construction program especially, there's another way to do that with multifamily properties specifically through the HERS index. HERS index stands for, I think it's Home Energy Rating System. And it's a very popular way that multifamily buildings are evaluated in terms of energy performance. It's the way that they access incentives in Connecticut as well, so they have to do it anyway. So we wanted to try to, you know, piggyback on that and simplify the process for them. And then we also added some bonuses and additional ways to access additional CPACE financing. The first one was through adding bonus technologies. So specific technologies that, you know, promote clean energy, but also are promoting other aspects of, you know, what we're trying to do here in Connecticut: resiliency, energy transition goals, electrification. So adding those in and allowing for folks to get more financing by incorporating some of those bonus technologies. And then lastly, also looking at giving projects that are designed for all electric net zero to get a higher percentage still. Actually, the highest percentage that we're proposing is by designing for net zero. And then, so as I mentioned, we've had some pretty proactive feedback from our capital provider partners, especially. And so some of them have seen some of the ideas that, you know, we're putting forth. We've collected some initial feedback over the last couple of weeks, and Mackie's going to join me here in talking through some of these. But these are just, you know, some of the things that they've come back to us and said or had opinions on, I guess. So in terms of determining the TECC, they'd like to see that simplified, you know, in an easier way to understand. They think it can be subjective. We're reviewing those construction budgets and coming up with that TECC. So they'd like to see that simplified a little bit. And some of them have proposed even using 1% of the property value, as opposed to, you know, running through the construction budget and only allocating portions of the budget that are associated directly with the hard and soft costs of the design and build to the TECC. They also think that tying the percent of energy performance above code to the TECC is difficult to achieve with 2021, the IECC 2021 code. We will be adopting IECC 2021 in Connecticut in October, and we will be adopting it with no changes. So it will be more stringent than what we've seen in 2015. So our capital providers think that it might be stringent enough. And there are, as I mentioned, other CPACE new construction programs in other jurisdictions, for various reasons, have different thresholds, lower thresholds, but they're kind of comparing our program to others. Of course, as capital providers, they want to access more CPACE financing if they can. And of course, another suggestion was looking at other building performance standards, just as we did with HERS, to potentially come up with a baseline. But Mackie, I'll let you add anything that I might have missed.
You know, what it's all going to come down to is that third point there is that lenders, it's in their interest to lend as much as possible, and they can make more money. And the CPACE market it's growing incredibly fast. We've got the little pool of specialized capital providers we saw in the early days is getting acquired by large financial institutions. So you've got large sophisticated players coming in who they're focused on capital deployment, and combine that with the fact that new construction in many CPACE programs is coming online or becoming an option where the opportunities for lending are very high. You're not doing little $250,000 or $500,000 solar projects. You're doing, as we saw, multi-million-dollar new construction financing. So the market is more sophisticated, bigger, and active, and they're focused on new construction. So the tension becomes them wanting to, in many cases, really just reduce the barriers or the entry points for CPACE financing. I mean, the beginning conversation is their beginning standpoint typically is just, if we're meeting code, you should let us lend 20%, up to 20% of CPACE financing. On our end, we need to preserve the intent of this really powerful tool. This is a senior assessment on the property that was created in order to create energy benefits. So we need to make sure that we are getting something, and we're not just giving away this important security. So that's the tension: is where do we set the appropriate level of energy performance, or whatever we're getting? What's the energy we're getting from allowing capital providers access to the energy benefit we're getting for allowing capital providers access to this tool? So that's where we'll be engaging with them and trying to figure out that right level.
Laura, may I ask a question?
Of course. I knew you. This is a particular interest of yours, so I was hoping you would weigh in, Madam Mayor.
This is, and it is very exciting, and it just really stimulates my mind of the possibilities. I think you're right, Mackie, about keeping the green priorities of Connecticut front and foremost instead of the financial marketing part of it. But I was just wondering, what other building performance standards could we use? I mean, would it be, Energy Star? I'm not really sure where you would go with this, and that might make it easier to sell this program to the users because they might already be enrolled in Energy Star using it.
Yeah, that's one of the two that's mentioned, because capital providers, that's what they say. And I said, yeah, that's a great idea. We'd love a simpler approach. What would you recommend? Energy Star is one of the two. The other is LEED certification that we often get. We're certainly going to do a deeper dive into those over the next month. But what I'm told by our technical partners, that in many or most cases, the code, you designing the 2021 code, you're actually in most cases already an Energy Star building, or you might not be getting much from an energy standpoint with some of those certifications, given how strict code is getting. But I would much prefer that if we can just, that's why I love the HERS approach, where if we can just piggyback on existing standards that the market is already using, rather than these complicated mechanisms of energy, performance above codes and TCCs and all this stuff, that would be the ideal. So that's what I'm hoping over the next month, as we're talking with stakeholders, we can uncover something like that, where it's an existing standard, but it's clear that we are getting some benefit for handing over the security of the CPACE assessment.
Who else besides the capital partners are the other partner? What other partners are you engaging with, your stakeholders?
Other CPACE administrators are really the other players in this, just learning from their experience.
Because I'm wondering if our energy priorities as a state, whether it's somebody like you maybe can weigh in, well, you happen to know the key person, so it could prioritize some of our, I don't want to say our huge leaps forward, but I remember from years ago, we were trying to push down the costs of renewable energy. And we did this over a course of now 10 years, and we're seeing the benefits of it. So if there are these stretches, maybe it's battery, or maybe it's not fuel cell necessarily, but geothermal or whatever it is. And those projects are incorporated in these projects. That's where the financing model could be a little more lucrative for the capital partners as well as the other the clients. So just besides, I don't think you can go all financing one way. I think you have to have a balance between the two to make this really work.
Yep. Yeah, and it's finding that where the right place is tough. And yeah, I hear we're trying with like batteries and things like that. That's where the bonus technology idea came in, where we're saying, you know, here's batteries is one of those, EV chargers, electric heat pumps. You know, if you do 3, we got a list of 7. Actually, I think we got up to nine things. If you do 3 of those, you automatically unlock 5% more financing. So, you know, that's more simpler. It's not, you know, models or anything, or you have to, it's just do one of these like clear priorities of the state, and you immediately unlock 5% more.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in and say, you know, all really good discussion. We're definitely, as you know, at DEEP, we're very focused on whole building energy retrofits. You know, really thinking beyond efficiency and solar, and incorporating all of the technologies that you know, to try to reduce costs and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So, and also, we're doing a lot of work on codes and standards at DEEP, and also on things like building energy labeling. And as we evolve in that work and make progress in that work, we should explore in the future how to coordinate the standards and the codes that we're developing, such as high performance building standards for state buildings, for example, and whether those could provide sort of benchmarks for some of the programming.
This is Adrienne speaking. I do have a question. Have you in your stakeholder group some of the large builders, and how do they shake out in looking at the opportunities that CPACE provides?
The developers that we've talked with, they love the tool. You know, some I guess I can mention name. You know, like Alan Lazikowski, you know, Laz of Laz Parking, Spinnaker. They've either used the tool or we, you know, are trying to in the case of Spinnaker. But a lot of those folks and developers, they tend to do the type of housing or buildings that already would have met these requirements. They already are building, you know, pretty efficient buildings. So, you know, they love CPACE because they're getting rewarded for for doing that, doing what they would have done already. You know, they're getting this cheaper and more attractive capital. You know, if you have recommendations on what we want to do though is try to find folks and pull them, you know, get them to do things they wouldn't have done otherwise. So we could use all the help we can get in terms of conversations with developers, you know, who might not be aware of the tool, and so we could educate them and get feedback on this design. So if you have, you know, if we could have conversation about any of those, we'd love to do that.
Yeah, and I think I'll add to that too. I think with the addition of HERS and being able to use that, which hopefully will make it to the final version, I think that'll open up a lot. I know that the multifamily developers especially have been interested in us, you know, getting into using HERS just because it's easier for them to do. They're doing it anyway. So, you know, we've got a few connections through the utilities there, but as Mackie said, you know, we'd welcome any of those conversations, certainly.
Lonnie, this is Matt. If I could just comment, Mackie, I agree with your instinct here about, you know, we're giving the financing parties a huge benefit with this priority placement of our liens. And I really think we need to, I think, strike the balance in favor of, energy efficiency and energy savings. So my suggestion are a few. One is, and Vicki mentioned it, the state has high performance building standards that they've adopted for state buildings or buildings receiving state funding. So I wonder, I mean, first of all, that is code for them. So we should look at how our implementation would play out if that's code, or I know we're using the international, whatever it is, building code for 2021 based on the memo, but maybe we should be thinking about using the high performance building standards. They're kind of dated. And frankly, I don't know how much more stringent they are.
We're working on updating them currently. So
yeah, but I think we should look at that, because that really is, I think, an expression of that's where we want to go. And meeting the building code, I would agree. I mean, I would say responsible developer is going to meet and exceed it, because it's in their self-interest to do so. So the memo said we have like a 5% above trigger to qualify. I think we should consider moving that to at least 10% above under the new proposal, if I read the memo right. And maybe talk to OPM. And there used to be a group out at EastCon, I think Lynn Stoddard ran it for a while, that did a lot of baseline of public buildings, and they might have some good thoughts. And I don't know, I know we have public comment, but it might be worth doing some outreach to groups that, have a lot of experience with high performance building or baselining buildings, if they still exist. But I think we should, I think that, and I also agree that we should look at add-on technologies. I mean, there's a whole sort of Internet of Things approach to new buildings now, where developers are, can sort of program or provide programming for rooms to residents where they control them. It's just, there's a lot more efficiency. The world has really changed in the last 5 years. So if we're revising this, I agree with taking that deep dive and having some, also some sort of add-on perks if they do things we really want them to do.
I think that's fantastic. I had not thought of the high performance building code. You're right. The state has already sort of drawn a marker of what high performance is. So we can, I recall it's like it's similar to the approach we're taking here. It's a percentage above code performance that a city can choose to adopt, I believe, if they want to take the high performance requirement. So yeah, we'll look at that. Yeah, Lynn, we know Lynn well. We talked to her. But generally, that's exactly I appreciate that feedback. It's good for us to hear that from the board as we enter into these discussions. Just as, we're getting a lot of pressure, and a lot of other programs are getting watered down. We see a lot of them moving to just meeting code, which, I mean, a builder is going to have to do anyway. So we're not really getting anything. So having that sort of sentiment behind us as we enter into these conversations is helpful and important. So thank you.
And Mackie, we're happy to coordinate. We have people working in this space at D, but again, we're in the process of updating the high performance building standards. But we can talk to you about where we are with that, and also coordinate on issues related to the CNLM program that have overlap.
Yeah, maybe if we could come in and brief that team on our proposal here and get their feedback.
I think that would be great. I think it would also be great to brief the EEB, the Joint Committee, get feedback from them, and but certainly also the team here at DEEP.
Great, yeah, we did get EDC feedback.
Oh, sorry about that.
To talk to your team.
Okay, so we're postponing 6. This is very, very good feedback, and glad everybody weighed in. I think just for the minutes, should reflect that Jeff Beckham had to leave during that discussion, so he wanted us to be aware of that. So we're moving on to, Yes, sorry.
This is John. I just had a
Hi, John.
quick comment. Hi. I just wanted to say thank you to Matt for raising the issue of where public comment comes in, because we talk often about optics, and certainly we're always open to good ideas, but that doesn't mean that people understand that. And this bringing public comment forward in this process is a really good signal to people who may be skeptical about our process, that we really do want to hear from them. So thank you, Matt, for picking that out and your suggestion.
I agree. And
Thanks,
thank
John. I agree.
you guys, the team, for all the work you've done on this. It's exhausting, but really thank you. So clearly, talk about diving deep. That's what you've been doing. So our next item is a discussion of incentive programs, updates, and recommendations. And I think, Brian Garcia, you wanted to lead us off on that?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick greetings from Sergio. He sent his regards. He is heading south to visit his mother. It's all good. He just wants to visit moms. So we're going to have the great members of his team, Sarah Pine, talk to us about the RCIP update, the revenue grade meter update, I think how we're doing on our SHREC registries. And then we've got Ed Kranich and Sarah Harari, who are going to update us on battery storage. And just for the next couple of agenda items, I'm going to ask our teams to move quickly because we've got an exciting item with Joel Reinbold that we want to get into. So Sarah, let me turn it over to you.
Sure, thanks, Brian. All right, so RCIP has stopped accepting and approving new incentive applications as of December 30th. For all intents and purposes, RCIP will reach the 350 megawatts of deployed capacity over the next few weeks. We're currently working with contractors to get their open approved projects over the finish line. We have a January 31st deadline in place, but some additional completion time for RCIP-E projects may need to be provided because there have been many constraints, such as supply chain, weather issues that have caused some project delays. Thanks to the board, RCIP-E was designed to backfill RCIP. It also supported the local solar industry through COVID and the transition to the solar tariff program with an additional 32 megawatt expansion beyond the 350 megawatt target. We could move to the next slide, please. As we reach the RCIP statutory target of 350 megawatts of deployed capacity, we will be able to create our final SHREC tranche. This will be tranche 6, which is currently at 27 megawatts, and we're expecting to add about another 5 megawatts in the coming weeks. In total, we're anticipating the SHREC, just to SHREC over 300 megawatts of capacity. Next slide, please. All right, we're making great headway on the 3G RGM meter upgrades despite supply chain issues and labor shortages. As of January 17th, we've updated 1,070 meters out of 4,976 meters. This represents about 22% of the goal to replace homeowner-owned and solar lease 2 meters. We've also received approval from NEPOOL GIS Operating Rules Committee meeting that will allow us to use the estimation methodology created by Professor Ken Gillingham on 4,976 homeowner-owned or solar lease 2 projects that may not have a meter replaced in time for the 3G sunsets. This ruling will allow us to stretch the 3G meter upgrade time frame out to 2026 if necessary. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Thank you for that update. The only thing I wanted to add in addition to what Sarah has said is I really want to thank Paul Belville, who's the attorney for NEPOOL, Brian Farnan, Sergio Carrillo on our team, worked with Paul over the last 6 months to understand the NEPOOL rules, specifically as it applies to revenue grade meters, and working through this process, we were able to get that designation. So this buys us more time. The estimate methodology, as you see in the materials, is incredible. It's incredible how people use big data these days. So just wanted to make sure we recognize Paul Belville. Any quick questions, comments before we move to battery storage? All right, let's go to battery storage. I'll turn it over to Ed Kranich.
All right, thank you, Brian. So energy storage solutions progress to date. So as anticipated, the Energy Storage Solutions Program launched on January 1st, 2022. Launch was the result of many months of work with the EDCs to develop a cost-effective program with a positive net benefit to all program participants and ratepayers. In particular, Energy Storage Solutions aims to benefit customers who experience more frequent or longer duration power outages, critical facilities, and those in distressed municipalities and low-income customers. So the program will deploy 580 megawatts of behind-the-meter battery storage system for residential and non-residential systems in 9 years, and be able to cost recover the incentives it provides and the administrative costs that it incurs. So like I said, it opened to contractors and third-party owners as of January 1st, 2022. And as of January 20th, we've received 20 applications from local and national contractors to be eligible to offer energy storage solutions incentives to their customers. We've approved 8 of them so far, and the rest have either been submitted this week or we're still working through the applications with them. We don't expect to deny any of the applicants that are in the queue now, so all are expected to be approved and eligible in short time. So we launched the customer enrollment platform, which is the system that contractors will use to submit incentive applications for customers, last Friday on January 14th. So in the first week, we received 1 residential project and 11 commercial and industrial incentive applications. So I believe, as Eric mentioned earlier, we have found that there was some pent-up demand, especially for commercial and industrial projects. So the residential system that we have so far is 3.5 kilowatts of our 50 megawatt 3-year target, while the C&I projects actually totaled 31 megawatts of capacity. So that's quite a bit for just the first week, but we know that was the result of pent-up demand, so we don't expect to go through 30 megawatts a week going forward. However, in the next couple of weeks and months, we will look at applications as they come in to see maybe if some kind of an adjustment might need to be made to our targets, and to see if any further discussion with PURA is necessary, to consider maybe borrowing capacity from subsequent steps or adding overall capacity.
Hey, Ed, just a quick comment before we move to the next slide. I just wanted to say that we're typically working towards targets. We always focus on numbers. So we have 580 megawatts by 2030. The first 3-year cycle that we're talking about here is 100 megawatts for residential and non-residential. So it's good that we're seeing deployment, but what I would say is that we fail in implementing the policy if we don't ensure on the residential side that we meet no less than 40% of the installations in vulnerable communities, which consists of low-income households, affordable housing, distressed communities. And then on the non-residential side, what PURA wants to see is hitting resilience for specific end-use customers. So those on the grid edge, those are business customers who experience the 10 longest and the 10 worst or 10 most frequent grid outages, critical facilities, small businesses, and those facilities that are using fossil fuels as backup. So even though we have targets, our focus on marketing is to make sure those other key policy elements that PURA has stated are lifting as well. So we're going to be eyeing all of that to move forward. Cool. Sorry, I just want to add.
Yeah, no, that's great. And just looking at that list of projects, if you want to jump back one slide, just the spread of distressed or grid edge communities is not the spread that we want to see overall. So as time goes on, and as I'll explain in the next slide, how how we plan to reach that. So next slide, please. So in the next 3 to 6 months of the program, really our priorities are to complete the development work on the customer enrollment portal. So right now it's mainly based, in the application stage. So we want to work out completion, inspections, and really just kind of finish building the program in a way that makes sense to contractors. So we're continuously receiving feedback on what works, what doesn't. Especially with our experience in residential, we're very familiar with that, but we're not as familiar with the C&I project flow. So that's just something, we're trying to tailor the process as we go. So in the next couple of months, we're also planning to meet with contractors and other stakeholders, manufacturers and distributors of equipment to discuss their expectations for 2022. Of course, supply chain is the buzzword these days, and we're learning that some contractors can't get a hold of equipment and some manufacturers can't get a hold of the chips and materials that they need to actually make these batteries. So, we're looking ahead to shortages and to just kind of expect maybe, or just to learn what to expect in the next couple of months. And, this is also a new market for a lot of solar contractors who are looking to get into battery storage. That's part of our outreach is to work with our existing solar contractors to see how they can add battery storage to their toolkit. But they are also working through a change with the loss of RCIP and the transition to the tariff. So there are a lot of new opportunities in Connecticut that are posing a challenge. So they, really just trying to change a lot of things at the same time. So we want to get a good idea of what their expectations are for selling and installing batteries this year. Next, we have outreach campaigns. So working with municipal clean energy groups and low to moderate income and underserved channels. So we've opened some conversations with town stakeholders, Clean Energy Task Force, and Operation Fuel to just kind of learn how to best reach out to those customers so we can reach that 40% underserved target for residential. Next, we have financing products. So developing residential and C&I products to help both underserved and standard market rate customers access batteries in a more affordable way. And per our PURA orders for the next 6 to 8 months, we will be meeting with stakeholders to develop a front of the meter incentive program, as well as looking into managed EV charging. And that's about it. So any questions on that? Or additional comments, Brian?
That's it. Great job, Ed. Great update.
Thank you.
Can I just ask the question? It's Adrian again. Thank you for that. I didn't realize that we had a specific objective for LMI communities. How is that going to play out? Because you're not talking about batteries that are going into people's homes. Are we talking about only multi-families, or are we talking about only sustainability? I don't understand how we're going to justify the 40%.
This is Brian. I would say that, so Chair Gillette from the outset has made vulnerable communities a priority, that they receive a large part of the benefits, if not a majority of the benefits. Given what we know in the solar market, there are low-income families who are able to go solar. So single-family, owner-occupied opportunity, yes. The challenge is, how do we get into the single-family renters? I think the tariff program has some really unique designs, the renewable energy solar PV tariff, that is going to enable some of that to happen. And then on affordable housing, which is really the hardest market to figure out, we've been working really closely with DEEP. We got some changes in the tariff policy last session that I would argue sets Connecticut up probably the best it's ever been, and comparatively to other states in terms of finally figuring out affordable housing, how it's going to participate in tariffs and storage. So I think we're going to see behind the meter storage happen in low-income communities. But we are, given Puro's emphasis and prioritization, our focus on marketing is going to be targeting those customers. It's going to be very hard. We're not thinking it's going to be easy, but we're very committed to reaching it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Great question. Thank you. All right, let's move on if we can.
Yes, so we're going to get an update now, and I think, I should also ask people to try to wait around a little bit after this item is completed, because Joel Reinbold is going to talk about a collaborative project to be able to secure, hopefully, some of the federal money that's newly available. So it would be good to listen to that. So the next item is investment updates and recommendations, and Bert Hunter and Mariana.
Yeah, actually, Mariana Treef will handle this.
Okay.
Reed, thank you.
Go ahead, Mariana.
There you are.
We can't hear you, Mariana.
It looks like her audio might not be working. Why don't we come back to Mariana, Bert, and let's go to the update on the bonds, and we can come back. Mariana, just signal when your audio works.
Sorry, maybe Mariana log out and log back in, and we're going to go to the Green Liberty notes. So, I'm actually going to in the interest of time, I'm going to hand it over to David Beach, who is the manager of the Green Liberty Notes project. So, David, are you there?
I'm here, Bert. Thanks. Yeah, I'll try to be quick here. So this is the crowdfunding offering that we've been doing with Raise Green. This offering opened up on December 14th and just closed last Friday on January 14th. Just as a bit of a reminder to the board, the purpose of this offering has really been to target a couple of the Green Bank's goals, which I've highlighted here on the screen. And that's to make the benefits of the green economy inclusive and accessible to all individuals, families, and businesses, and to really do that by advancing market transformation and green investing. So we think this has been a strong first step in achieving those goals. We were able to raise over $185,000 from 114 investors, including 63 from the state of Connecticut, so more than half coming from Connecticut, which is really great. We also received 59 investments of below $1,000, which is a pretty neat stat, considering that our Green Liberty bonds start at $1,000. So that's a lot of people that we were able to reach that likely would not have been willing to invest $1,000 in a Green Liberty bond, but because we were able to lower the minimum investment all the way to $100, they're now able to invest in the green economy of Connecticut. So that's really exciting. We can go ahead and go on to the next slide. So we were lucky enough to be featured in a bond buyer article. And in addition to just speaking about the offering, we got some high praise in there in terms of this quote, which I'll read quick. In terms of investor engagement, the Connecticut Green Bank is one of the more sophisticated issuers in the entire muni bond market. So some really high praise and great to get that press and exposure. And the last thing I'll just highlight here quick is the map in the lower left. This is just showing where our investments came in, and the size of the bar is in relation to how many investments we got from each place. So you can see the strong demand from Connecticut, but it's also unique to see all of the different places where folks invested from across the country. And we even got investments from Hawaii, which you can't see here, but it's cool to see some strong geographic distribution of people wanting to invest in the economy of Connecticut. So with that, I will just open it up to questions if there are any.
Yeah, hi, this is Bettina Brown Eyes from the state of Connecticut. Just wanted to know if you're going to be, doing more and more of these, and like, do you have a forward financing schedule on how often you're going to be rolling these out, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, go ahead, Bert.
Yeah, the board approved quarterly issuances of the Green Liberty notes. So it is a minimum 2-year a $2 million program, up to $250,000 in Green Liberty notes each quarter, but they will all be a 1-year maturity. And we expect the yield to vary. We're currently issuing them at about a 50 basis points premium to fully FDIC insured CDs, which we think is probably a reasonable premium to account for non-FDIC protection, lack of immediate liquidity because you do have to hold the note for a 1-year period with no exceptions, and they're not currently rated, although we are looking into a rating with Lamont Financial.
Very cool. Thanks.
This is Lonnie. Just quickly, just thinking from a marketing perspective, are we going to do some fancy certificates or anything that so the people who buy it can, give it to their grandchildren, put it in a nice frame and give it to the grandchildren when they start saying, "What are you doing about renewable energy?" and that kind of thing, because it feels like a really good opportunity to tell people what we're doing.
Yeah,
Lonnie, can we call that the OK Boomer certificate?
Yeah, and the OK Millennial certificate, evidently. There are issues with
Eric,
that as well.
you want to handle that one, Eric?
Sure. We have something that we worked on for the Green Liberty bonds as a certificate that we're going to use as the basis for something here. Rudy and I have a loose plan of how we're going to go about this. So stay tuned. We will issue something.
Great. I think it's a good opportunity. Okay, so Mariana is back with us. Mariana?
Yes, can you guys hear me now?
Can.
Great, perfect, thank you. So I'll try to keep this quick. Mariana Teresa, consultant at the Green Bank, and I work on Bert's team. Just as a background, the board approved back in October of 2018, $1.2 million for this 1 megawatt run-of-the-river hydro project in the Farmington River in Canton, Connecticut. And our funds were leveraged to buy $4.7 million from a senior loan from Provident Bank. Since then, the developers have experienced some delays due to COVID travel restrictions, other FERC requirements, and they had to change one of their main subcontractors. This also led to additional cost, which they were able to finance through a bridge loan from the main contractor for the project. So since then, we've actually leveraged more, $650,000 in more funds. Despite the delays, though, the construction was pretty much completed in December, and the turbine is now running and producing electricity. The one item of construction that's pending are the Crest Gates that need to be installed. And because the project finalized construction right in the middle of the winter, they need low river flows and warm weather to be able to install those Crest Gates. So they hope to do it as soon as possible, but no later than the summer. And it is because of that they've asked, that the developer and owner has asked us to extend our final completion date in our loan agreement for the construction until October 31st, 2022. It's probably a conservative date, but they just want to make sure that they have enough time to finalize all of the construction and complete these Crest Gates. And as we've shared with the board, this is a project that has had a lot of publicity. The electricity that will be generated will be sold to deep collaboration with a number of stakeholders, deep the town of Canton, and we do expect that once everything's completed, there will be ribbon cutting, signage, and media coverage, and we've included this as part of our amendment to make sure that the developers are complying with that. If you could go to the next slide. I've included some pictures here from the completed project. When you see there on the left is sort of a visual representation of what you're able to monitor remotely and how much energy has been generated since the turbines started online. Also a view out of the clean out gate, which is in front of the intake gates. And if you go to the next slide, please. You just see some more pictures about the inlet and gates and the trash rack cleaner in action. And as you'll see, these pictures were taken recently. There's snow on the ground, and despite sort of the snow and the cold weather, system is functioning well. And we expect that once the Crest Gates are installed, that it will improve the efficiency of the turbine by about 10 to 20%. So with that, the formal resolution is to extend the project construction completion date to October 31st of 2022.
Okay, so questions, comments, observations? Do I hear a motion to approve resolution 7?
So moved. This is Matt.
Thank you, Matt. Do you hear a second?
Second, this is Bettina.
Thank you, Bettina. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining? Excellent, excellent. Moving forward. So we're coming to the end of our meeting, and it's something we really want, if you can, stay around for a few more minutes. We'll make it quick, but we want to welcome Joel Reinbold, who is the director of the Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology and the Connecticut Hydrogen Fuel Cell Coalition. And he's leading an effort to really pursue some major bucks in a regional context on some projects. Brian Garcia, did you want to step in first before Joel appears?
Yeah, the only quick comment I wanted to make, Madam Chair, is that these are really exciting times in terms of what's happening with regards to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act at the federal level. You know, the DOE alone has received $62 billion of additional resources, and one component of that has to do with demonstration, opening up the Office of Clean Energy Demonstration, which I believe is $21.5 billion of the $62 billion. And $8 billion of that is for green hydrogen hubs. So Joel is going to walk us through what he and the team in the industry are thinking about to make Connecticut competitive. What I think we're going to try to do, and Brenda and Lonnie's suggestion is at the next upcoming several meetings, we're going to try to feature something happening locally and at the federal level on these areas so folks can get a bird's eye view of what's happening. So Joel, thank you for being with us here today, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thanks very much, Brian. And just a sound check. Am I coming through okay?
Perfect, Joel.
Yeah, we hear you.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for inviting me to make a very brief presentation. I will be brief and provide, be able to respond to some questions at the end. So the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act comes forward as provisions for hydrogen hub. And via the US DOE, we expect an FOA, a funding opportunity announcement within 6 months. If you could advance this slide, please. So that the Infrastructure Act has these provisions for hydrogen hubs in the U.S., 1 nuke, 2 nuclear, 2 fossil fuel, and 1 renewable. There's also provisions for an electrolysis program and hydrogen manufacturing recycling. Next slide, please. So we think, well, I think we would be a natural to apply for one of the hydrogen hubs under the renewable banner. And that is, we've got renewable energy to produce green, carbon-free hydrogen. We've got the notion to deploy this in areas where it counts, and that includes maybe prioritize distressed cities. And we've got a very, very strong global research manufacturing community and the ability to support non-fossil, non-mineral, non-rare earth using domestic technology. This will provide us with long-term energy storage and energy sustainability. Next slide, please. So Connecticut has done an outstanding job to support offshore wind. It's got a capacity factor, give or take 40%. Hence, there will be a need for energy storage. There's lots of different ways for energy storage. Rely on the grid when you don't have a lot. When you have 2,000 megawatts, that's not going to be possible. There's physical flywheels, pump storage, batteries, and certainly we've heard from the ISO, when all else fails, you move into curtailment. Hydrogen is just one option for a potential solution. It'll provide storage, transport via different mediums, including natural gas pipelines, and we could separate the hydrogen out if and as needed. The products could be hydrogen blends, direct use for transportation, combined heat and power, and electric power, and we can use the hydrogen, the renewable green hydrogen, to decarbonize the natural gas infrastructure, and that would be helpful to help curtail the need for additional pipelines coming from areas where the gas is fracked. Next slide, please. So here's the value chain. We've got offshore wind in the pipeline. We've got markets for electricity, heavy-duty vehicles. We've got the ability to put this into distressed cities, communities of need, and we've got infrastructure for storage and transport. We've got a business case for decarbonization of the grid, and that certainly includes the natural gas local distribution companies. And we've got technology for blending and deblending, that is separation of the hydrogen after it's blended into the natural gas. We've got strong policy for diversity and grid resiliency. And maybe one of our stronger attributes will be the domestic manufacturing. Very, very strong capabilities for research and manufacturing. Connecticut is still in some circles known as the fuel cell capital of the world, but what that really means is we've got technology for electrolysis. It doesn't mean we have to be using natural gas for the fuel cells. We can be using green hydrogen, renewable hydrogen that's been sourced from offshore wind. And this would put us in a place to minimize, reduce any geopolitical or foreign trade issues. The bottom line of all this is clean energy, energy reliability, and we get the jobs, economic development associated with all of this. Next slide, please. So moving forward, here's what we're thinking: expand the manufacturing network, increase domestic research, expand and identify some of the markets for both power and motive opportunities, and create opportunities for jobs. Target investment in distressed communities, and this could be things like manufacturing and storage, energy storage for increased reliability and cleaner energy in certain areas like public housing, for example, mission critical facilities, and refine technique for management. And that would be integrity management with blending in the natural gas systems. We could leverage all of this to drive electrification and decarbonization, and we would have technically, we'd be also looking to have these applications standardized with codes and standards for safety. Onward, next slide. So here's the big picture. Here's the big driver: offshore wind, 30 gigawatts. Some folks have indicated it may be more than 30 gigawatts. It's gigawatts, not megawatts. Gigawatts with a G. So we got a lot of power coming in, and that's the good news. The bad news is it's got a capacity factor. It only provides energy about 40% of the time. So we do need energy storage. There's a lot of options out there. Certainly batteries are a good choice, but hydrogen may be another choice. Next. And here's what makes Connecticut, this might be tough to see, but here's why Connecticut stands out. Connecticut is really an epicenter for research and manufacturing. not only can we use this technology to meet our goals for clean energy, we make it here. We can be an exporter. Right now in Connecticut, there's about 600 companies, businesses, organizations in the supply chain. The region that includes Massachusetts and New York and some of the other states has got about 1,100, 1,200 companies. So Connecticut really stands out as the research manufacturing hub. Onward, next slide. So this is a potential location for applications, and this is mission critical energy users in the region. And what we have in Connecticut. So this means that if we do this, will we find applications? And the short answer is yes. There will be opportunity for deployment of hundreds of megawatts at hundreds, if not thousands, of sites. So we can have very successful demonstration. Next. What's in it for us? In the region, there's about $1.4 billion in revenue, about 1,100 to 1,200 supply chain companies, over 6,000 total jobs, $615 million in labor income. For Connecticut alone, it's about half of that. So there's about 600 million in revenue, about 600 companies in the supply chain, and that's all the companies, the OEMs and all the supply chain component manufacturers. There's about 2,800-ish jobs in Connecticut associated with this industry, and the bottom line is no one else, has this cluster of research and manufacturing. California may have a bigger economy, and they may be buying more of our technology, but we make it here in Connecticut, and this would be a good goal. Keep Connecticut as the hub of this clean energy manufacturing as well as deployment. Next. This is basically just a little bit more granular chart of the economic value in the Northeast, and again, Connecticut is about half of that. Next. Next slide, yeah. Here's some of the metrics that I would look to do. One is to meet the DOE's goal of cost, $1 per kilogram within the decade. I'd also look to increase blending 1 to 20% in natural gas. That would put us on a pathway for decarbonization of our natural gas system. I'd like to use a metric to meet or exceed the retail cost of power, creation of safety standards to keep everyone comfortable, reliability standards for energy reliability via the storage. And I think, with some investment, we could potentially move our supply chain up by 50%. Those are all just very high level goals. These are goals that I've been thinking about. How do we have cleaner energy, more reliable energy, and how do we make it here for jobs and economic development? Next slide, please. So, yeah, here's a real eye chart. So here's the SWOT, and let me just give you, just a real quick summary of it. Strengths: we've got a very strong supply chain. We've got offshore wind as the energy provider, and we've got strong markets. Opportunity: we got an opportunity to increase economic development, energy reliability, revenues, and sustainability. Our weaknesses: it's going to take some time, so we need investment. We need to move forward with at-scale manufacturing. So we can't do these this technology, with onesies and twosies with guys in white lab coats. I mean, we really have to start moving forward with advanced manufacturing, robotics, at scale production, and we will need to refine the technology with technical protocols. The last on the bottom right, threats. Our threats is competition. It's from low-cost fossil fuels. We're going to have to compete with low-cost fuels, and some of these fuels are exploitive. There's also perception of safety, a concern of safety with hydrogen that has to be managed with standards and protocol. And also, as I'm pretty sure we're going to find out, we're going to have a lot of competition from other states. California has announced they think they're the natural hydrogen hub. New York has made announcements. Texas has made announcements. So there's a number of states out there that believe they are the hydrogen hub, and they want to queue themselves up for that. In fact, California has announced, maybe coincidentally, they're going to put $2 billion into their hydrogen efforts, and that just happens to be the same number that 4 hubs at $8 billion, $2 billion apiece. So it would appear as though they're interested in showing the DOE they're going to put in their cost share. Competition with the states will be very, very tough. Next slide. So notwithstanding the competition, if you look at the OEMs, the supply chain resources, our research institutions, where we are with jobs and revenue and markets, and the ability to bring in renewable energy source, i.e. the offshore wind. Connecticut in the Northeast, is the natural region for an establishment of a hydrogen hub, and that would meet the goals of the president. Next slide. So, what are we going to do? Next steps. Well, we're looking to pull together the industry and to make sure the industry fully understands, where we need to go. We're working with our state officials and elected officials to better understand, the opportunity and try to get us queued up for this hydrogen clean energy economy. We're looking to pull together some sense of regional coordination. My opinion, I don't think Connecticut can do this alone. I think we have to work with at least Massachusetts, maybe Mass and Rhode Island, and maybe New York. So I think we're going to have a discussion on how to coordinate the states. If we don't coordinate, if we try to do it alone, I think we lose to California and maybe Texas and maybe even New York. But I think it's tough to move forward without a regional approach. What we'd like to do is pull together all of these, the industry, state, regional support, and our congressional delegation and the delegation from the region, and pull together an application. US DOE has to put together a funding opportunity announcement within 6 months. We expect that in June. Sounds like a long way away. It's really close. So we really need to find support for this sooner rather than later. And my next slide is a thank you. I know I moved through this very, very quickly. Please feel absolutely free and very comfortable. Give me a call, send me an email if you want to have a chat on this, if I can discuss this in more detail. And I would be pleased to respond to any questions you have right now. Thanks very much.
Joel, this is Lonnie. I'm just wondering, do you have any environmental groups on board? Because as we all know, citing anything in this area is very difficult, this kind of infrastructure, and any kind of go boom factor makes it even more difficult. And I'm just wondering if is that part of the coordinated pursuit that you're pulling together?
Yeah, in fact, that's one of the threats that I've mentioned, and that is there's a misunderstanding of hydrogen. Right now, most of the hydrogen is produced with steam, methane, reclamation, and it's produced via natural gas. So hydrogen right now is somewhat known as a fossil fuel produced energy gas. And we've got to break that misunderstanding. That is, we can take water with electrolysis made with renewable wind energy and make green hydrogen. That's a misunderstanding we have to break. So are we working with the environmental groups? We really haven't engaged in that yet. but it's going to be an absolute need because it's an easy misunderstanding to fall into. Steam reformed gas, steam reformed hydrogen is not great for the environment. But for energy storage, using some of the surplus wind energy to make the hydrogen, store it, decarbonize, blend it into the natural gas is a nice solution. We've got to get the environmental groups on board, and that has not started.
Any other questions?
Lonnie?
Yes, John, is that you?
Hi, it's John Harity. Yeah. First of all, I wanna say hello to my old friend Joel. We started maybe 20 years ago. We started the Connecticut.
Yeah, John, maybe you could not call me your old friend. Maybe you could call me your friend that you've known for a while.
Well, what I wanted to say is that it sounds like fuel cells have finally come around that corner that they were coming around for the last 40 years here in Connecticut. And certainly the Connecticut Roundtable on Climate and Jobs would be more than happy to work with you in building a coalition among labor and environmental groups.
John, that'd be fabulous. And, one of the things that, let me just say that's fabulous. And, one of the things that, I just don't have the resources right now to just do all this alone. So to the extent that, you can, bring in the network that Lonnie suggested, the environmental network, I think that moves us forward very, very efficiently. So one, thanks. And two, I think it's needed. I think we have to go in that direction. I think the industry has to recognize to move forward under this act. It can't be business as usual. It really has to be moving forward with green hydrogen, renewable resources, and potential making a business case for decarbonization.
Well, we'll be talking there, Joel.
John, thank you.
Joel, it's Vicki Hackett. Sorry to interrupt. How you doing? Thanks for coming in and giving us this presentation. It's been really helpful. We I think just sent you an email. We're going to be exploring the potential for hydrogen in Connecticut to increase our resilience, to provide more reliability, to help decarbonize various sectors, and to reduce costs for customers in our comprehensive energy strategy. And we have a scoping meeting on that coming up next month that I think we linked to in the email to you. So would very much like you to come in and be part of that process. Very supportive of the concept of a Northeast hydrogen hub, but have a lot of questions about use cases and how you would envision the best use cases here in Connecticut as far as incorporating offshore wind to have green hydrogen, which is the goal. We have issues of severe transmission constraints at the interconnection points, in particular in Massachusetts right now. So I guess I'd like to hear more about how you envision a hub in Connecticut helping to solve that particular problem, because if we can't get the wind into the transmission grid, that could be one of the best locations regionally to have a hydrogen hub, at the point of interconnection for the wind. So anyway, there are a lot of issues here, a lot of technical issues to walk through. There are also things that need to be explored with the gas system, and exploring use cases for integration of green hydrogen as a decarbonized replacement for natural gas. There are issues related to the infrastructure that we have for natural gas in place right now that might not support high levels of hydrogen, right? So I think you kind of teed that up in some of your bullets. So there's a lot here to unpack, and we're really interested in working with you. We're going to be doing a lot of that unpacking in our comprehensive energy strategy, and we would very much like you to come in and participate in our meeting in February on that.
Yeah, Vicky, absolutely. I'd be honored, and I think I can help out. And just as you said, I blasted through this PowerPoint very, very quickly, and certainly there's going to be this notion of, it's all about making electrolyzers. But clearly there's going to be a need for control technologies for bidirectional flow, both on the electric and the gas system, and where and how to start integrating some distributed energy resources to really smooth out some of the bumps on the grid at the point of interconnection. So all of these things you've raised, are spot on. They have to be addressed.
Yeah, it's important to do this strategically so that we're, leveraging federal dollars and, any potential state investment in the way that provides the most resilience and is the most cost effective for the state.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Agreed.
Okay, any other observations? We're now at almost 11:15, and I know we always promise our board we've got busy people to get them on their way. Any other observations or questions? And Joel's information, as you can see, is readily available, so I can double back with him. I should say that our next regular meeting is Friday, March 25th from 9 to 11. And I'm wondering if I can hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.